thank you for joining us. My name is Robert Clayton. I'm the senior content producer here at Leaders. For this session, I'm glad to be joined by Caleb, Tony, and Jason. And we're going to be discussing the art of keeping fans engaged during COVID, with a focus on the delivery of the virtual MLB Draft, all the way through to the setup of the World Series. Before we kick off, Tony, could you provide a bit more background behind your role there at Deltatre?
Yeah, sure, Robert. My name's Tony Page. I'm president of the Sport Experiences unit at Deltatre. So me and my team, we look after all of our digital products and projects, as well as our live data services and fan engagements around live major events.
And Caleb?
Hi, I'm Caleb Weinstein, and I work in our Media and Entertainment Industry Solutions group here at Google Cloud. And so I'm in a function that sits in between our vertical hardware teams and working with partners such as the MLB. And I really think about what are the challenges that we can focus on from an industry perspective. How do we use the capabilities of Google Cloud to help transform the media, entertainment, and sports industry in this case?
Fantastic. And lastly, Jason.
Thanks, Robert. My name is Jason Gaedtke. I'm the CTO at Major League Baseball. This is my 4th season with the league, and much of that time is spent building out a team focused on modernizing and upgrading our core platform infrastructure. So I'm really happy to be here today to talk about the partnership that we have with Tony and Caleb and some great partners here.
Fantastic. Well, I suppose just to set the background, what is the nature of the MLB, Google Cloud, and Deltatre partnership, Tony?
Yeah, so in I think it was late 2018, the MLB was in the market for a new CMS for the league, their teams and their partner sites, and went through a market assessment process to find a new CMS. In all, and I'm sure Jason can give us a bit more flavour later, but in all, I think there's nearly 300 destinations across all the properties, with Major League, Minor League, and the other associate partners as well. So MLB really took that as the opportunity to try and address some of the pain points they had from their incumbent platform, some of which were the speeds to publish content, particularly around breaking news or live events. The ability to get articles published as quickly as possible around live events is key to remain relevant in today's connected world. And really the kind of efficiency as well around is paramount around the MLB, because as I say, across all those sites, they publish almost 5,000 pieces of unique content every single day. So, flexibility, ease of use for the large and diverse group of editors. I think there are over 1,400 editorial operators across the MLB network producing all of that content. So to make sure the tool is easily accessible and easy to use is really critical. And a cloud-based and scalable solution to meet the huge demand, and a solution that could really easily integrate into the existing MLB infrastructure and seamlessly work with their other tools and assets as well. So, I'm very pleased to say that through that process, MLB chose to work with us at Deltatre using our Forge publishing platform and also the Google Cloud platform. And the combination of the three of us, we were really able to put together a fully cloud-based workflow management tool that is central to the acquisition, editing, curation, storage, and publishing of all that content. Forge is built really with, we've worked in live sports for many, many years at Deltatre, and Forge is built with that in mind. So it really allows for complex publishing through a single user interface, bringing in editorial content, data, images, video, and combining that with the global reach of the Google platform and its infrastructure of powerful management tools as well. It's really significantly improved the MLB's digital operations. Time to publish pieces of content come down from several minutes to just a few seconds. So, by partnering with us and with Google, MLB was able to re-platform, upgrade its capabilities and infrastructure into a really leading global solution. it was quite a short time frame to get to launch. I think we had pretty much 6 months before opening day, and we had a lot to do, full infrastructure transition, major site builds in multiple languages, huge content migration as well, and obviously the onboarding and training of the editorial teams. But I'm pleased to say that the partnership worked very, very well, and we made it a successful launch.
Fantastic. So Jason, coming to you, what is the role that each of these three organisations play in improving baseball fans' experience on the digital platforms?
Sure. First off, thanks for that synopsis of our project and our partnership, Tony. I think that's a great sort of lead in to dive a little deeper into what role the CMS plays in the MLB back office in our core infrastructure, and specifically the role of Deltatre and Google Cloud, in that ecosystem. So when I joined MLB in the spring of 2017, we were in the midst of a kind of a unique business transaction. We were selling a good part of our technology platform and our organization, branded BAMTech, to Disney. And this is the platform that later became Disney Plus and ESPN Plus, and powers a lot of first-party Disney properties at this point. Because of that transaction, MLB was in a pretty depleted state. We lost a good portion of our engineering staff, about 3/4 of the team, and also much of the technical digital infrastructure that had powered MLB products, for the last 20 years. This also presented an opportunity. It presented a modernization and refresh opportunity. So I came in with deep experience with the Google platform. I'd spent 5 years working across several different product areas at Google prior to the MLB role. I was familiar with the scale of the platform, powering multiple billion-plus user first-party apps, and also the talent within the team, particularly around infrastructure and media and machine learning. So there seemed to be a really interesting and exciting opportunity there to kind of join forces between MLB and Google Cloud. As Tony mentioned, we started looking at the CMS project in particular in the spring of 2018. We did a complete market scan. There's a spreadsheet somewhere in a Google Drive probably that is an artifact of that process. We looked at dozens of different CMS platforms, some sports specific, others not, with some of the goals that Tony described. I think he did a nice job sort of quantifying the parameters, of what we were trying to pursue. We narrowed that field down to a handful of candidates that were sort of the leading candidates in the field, and then to a pair. And we did a bake-off in the second quarter of 2018. I remember some of those early conversations. We went to the Deltatre team and said, we're really interested in a strategic partnership with Google. Can you guys work on that platform? At the time, Deltatre hadn't deployed into Google, but they were very open to it and very supportive, of those goals, and saw it as an opportunity, I think, for themselves to learn a new platform and kick the tires and see what its benefits were. So in addition to a really aggressive deployment timeline in basically the year from the spring of 2018 until the launch in 2019, we selected the partner, we piloted the platform, we got the core sort of publishing infrastructure up and running, not just in a production installation in GCP, but also development, QA, and staging for those environments. So we had a full production build test pipeline. We used a CI/CD flow here. And we were all learning, at the time. We were learning the Deltatre platform. We were learning GCP. Deltatre was learning GCP. I think the GCP team was learning about us during that process, and it all came together pretty well. One of the keys to success in that project, I think, was taking the year or so that we had in front of us and setting some pretty clear milestones. Instead of like backloading all of the risk with this sort of big bang launch before opening day 2019, we had a really specific goal to have all of our functionality in place by the end of the postseason for the 2018 season, which is October. That allowed us time to migrate content, train the staff, do some production testing during spring training of the following year, and ultimately launch. We also phased the project. So as Tony mentioned, we have about 300 properties under management through the MLB technology team. That includes MLB.com, Club.com websites for the major league teams, and also about 150 minor league websites in both Spanish and English. we couldn't do all that, in one pass. And so we had to sort of triage, the priorities there. And we obviously prioritized the MLB sites first, and then we did a second phase deployment based on that experience after the successful 2019 launch, between 2019 and 2020. And so, we've completed the full migration off of our legacy CMS. Tony was kind in describing the prior platform. It was end of life, to say the least. It was a internal homegrown system called Homebase. But it was one of those situations where the original authors had long since moved on. There was little or no documentation on the platform. It was legacy technology. It was really on its last leg. And so this was a huge strategic project for us to be able to upgrade that infrastructure, modernize it, and get some of the modern workflow and low latency publishing benefits that Tony described.
Perfect. And Caleb, how easy was it, I suppose, to integrate both your platforms together in such a short space of time?
Well, I think it's obviously it's really a testament to the team that Jason has built and the team at Deltatre. I mean, they've been great to work with, and I think we were able to get them up and running on GCP and trained on GCP pretty quickly, and really, frankly, we were able to move forward. And I think we're all very happy and excited about what the CMS system has brought us with the the launch of Film Room from Jason's team, and we're really excited to be working. So I don't think it was a hard lift, if you know what I mean, for us, but it's been great working with both organizations.
Fantastic. And I suppose, in what ways can technology make operators' lives easier, and how can it help reducing those operational costs?
Well, I think in what ways can cloud technology, right? And it is the ability for the cloud to kind of, scale seamlessly, and really you don't have to build for peak. You can sit there and you can do things, you can experiment. You don't need to kind of invest in that CapEx, needs up front. You can try something, you can then scale. You can, I think the challenge, as we all know in sports, and this has been true for all, the history of sport, is how do you build for peak? Sport isn't, particularly if you're an organization like the MLB, your season is, I think, 9 months a year, or even during the week. I think there were less games on a Monday night than there are versus the other nights. And, that continues across the sports industry. So cloud technology gives you the ability to scale up and scale down as your demand is needed, whether it's, it's a platform, obviously, with the CMS that's driven in that near real, game time usage, or, you're thinking about the on and the off season.
Fantastic. And I mean, Jason, coming to you, how complex was it to coordinate all these stakeholders remotely whilst trying to plan for this new season?
There were a lot of moving pieces in this, but I think there was also a lot of enthusiasm on all sides, and that helps a lot. It's sort of like having a tailwind on a project like this. Even though this was a very heavy lift and an ambitious project, a multi-year project, we actually used this initiative as a pilot for a much larger strategic partnership with Google. And what I mean by that is we took the opportunity to introduce the technology team that we were rebuilding at MLB to the GCP platform in the context of the CMS rebuild. The lessons we learned here, the expertise that was developed, the remote working model, the partner management, to your question, were all valuable sort of secondary benefits, of the project, in addition to launching the platform. To Caleb's point earlier, the way we look at this in terms of like launching core infrastructure within the cloud, it really simplifies our lives, and it allows us to focus on value add, with the limited resources that we have. This is essentially capacity on demand for compute, storage, and networking, but it's also operations and administration and site reliability engineering on demand as well. In the past, prior to this, we would have to time the market. We'd have to go out and do a budget and do a big capital spend and buy some racks worth of equipment and rack them and power them and cool them. When I came on board, this is sort of an extreme example, and it's not a best practice by any means, but we had a data center worth of hardware that had been racked and mounted and was severely underutilized. It was essentially like sitting there idle with lights flashing, depreciating, and just because the planning process had been disrupted or priorities took another turn or something. You don't run that risk in a cloud environment. You basically, pay for what you use, and there's an incentive to plan well and to consolidate your spend, so that you can get discounts and things like that. and so you have good, forecasting ability. But it's really nice to be able to operate at a higher level in our technology stack. Another example is not having to worry about, OS or database or app server version upgrades. That you sort of get that for free. You get basic monitoring for free as well in here. So I think all of those things were sort of a theory or a hypothesis at the beginning of this project, but it's really played out well, and that allowed us to expand that investment by an order of magnitude, basically, in terms of our technology strategy.
Caleb, I mean, how important and why is it so important to have that cloud-based environment when you're trying to collaborate together?
Well, I think it brings, it helps you span the world. And I think Jason touched on a little bit of this before, but when you think about Google, first and foremost, we're a consumer user focused company. That is our history. That is who we are. We think about users very deeply and very thoughtfully. But the secondary, I would say, success or key factors to success of Google is that we invested very heavily throughout our history on a globally distributed infrastructure. And I often talk about whether it's Atlanta, Accra, Amsterdam, or Auckland, we have been working in those places for nearly 20 years now, if not longer, and we have built out the infrastructure that supports that. And we've not just built physical infrastructure, but we've also built, the tools that help manage these applications on such large scale and such wide scale around the globe. And I think, that combined, frankly, with our, I'll say, leadership in thinking about ML as the next wave of tools to help manage these platforms are key to helping, the MLB and Deltatre, achieve success in these areas. And that's really what we think is, what we bring to the table and what helps, these applications get up and running. And whether, the teams that work on this work, on the MLB side across San Francisco and New York, and of course with Google, globally.
Yeah, if I can just add to that as well, from our perspective as well, that's absolutely critical, because we've got offices in big offices in Europe, in London, in Turin, in Italy, and we've got also a team in LA, and our product team is often remote from our project teams as well. So that kind of distributed architecture and ability to just all work together and collaborate regardless of where you are is so critical for our business and technology in general these days. But Google's global span is perfect for us.
Let alone, let's be honest, the federated nature of sports overall. Sports is a combination of the league, the teams, the players, and from an infrastructure perspective, it's not just having those infrastructure capabilities for let's call it the compute for bringing the stories to life to fans, but also having that infrastructure across 30 ballparks in this instance. And that's the CMS really starts with the play in the ballpark, and having the equipment there and the ability to manage that on one unified data plane is something we've also worked on with MLB.
Fantastic. And Tony, coming back to you, what impact has optimizing the MLB, back-end creation and distribution workflows had to support the MLB's efforts during COVID?
Yeah, well, again, it comes back to being truly cloud-based, very robust, very scalable. It's meant that the opportunity for remote working for the MLB's teams, the editors, it's just seamlessly supported. So, the vast majority of the tasks needed to create and publish content is available through the single Forge interface. So editorial staff can operate that, just as easily from home as they could in the office or at the ballpark, wherever their usual place of work is. So, again, that kind of easy distribution and ability to create content wherever you are, I think has really played, and maybe Jason, you can comment on this, I think it's really played into the hands of your team during the period of people having to work from home or being remote.
Absolutely. 2020 has been an unprecedented year globally, and that has been true at MLB as well. There are certain dates that are sort of will never be forgotten at this point. March 11th was the day that the NBA suspended their season. We were 3 weeks out from opening day at that point. And spring training and the run up to opening day is a really exciting time of year for baseball. They say hope springs eternal, and that's definitely true within the league. To have the pandemic strike at that point and really just obliterate the beginning of the season and create all kinds of uncertainty, really put us off of any plans that we had ever anticipated. And I think it speaks to the strength of the platform, the strengths of these partnerships, how well we were able to respond to that. Following the suspension of the MLB season on the 12th of March, there was a 4 to 6 week period there where we were basically recalibrating to this new reality. We didn't know if we were going to have baseball in 2020. We didn't know if there would be minor league baseball, if there would be a draft, and so on. And to the point we made earlier, the idea that we have this dynamic platform that scales up and scales down to demand allowed us to sort of ride out the inevitable waves, that came along with that. Our fans were curious, what was happening, and they would, we'd see waves of interest on the website when there were news events or announcements or whatever. When we reached a deal with the players to resume the season in a shortened format midway through the summer, we obviously had to rethink fundamental aspects, of the season, like scheduling. There's a new postseason format. We used to have a 10-team postseason tournament. Now we have a 16-team expanded format. All of those things end up being editorially curated and published and rendered using this platform. Basically everything that happens online is a module, that lives within Forge. And we spent the time that we had in Q2 of this year basically accelerating some of our modernization efforts. While we weren't playing baseball, that extra time was sort of a gift. And we actually sped up some of the cloud consolidation, migration, and even page refresh, design refresh type work that we had planned for the second half of the year. It gave our team something to do at a time of uncertainty, and it was a way that we could add value to the league and help support our fans. So specifically, we haven't talked much about content, the content that we host on the platform, but it's a pretty complex portfolio. It's not just a news site, but there's a news editorial aspect to it with news and photos, and a very low latency sort of breaking news, publishing requirement there. There's also rich media, long form games, video clips, highlights, featured content, highly produced content, and so on. So it's a pretty diverse, set of media. And then on top of that, you have all kinds of baseball analytics. So the schedule, the scoreboards, the standings, the statistics, our 3D or 2D simulation of the baseball game at this point. We're working on a 3D version of that. And they all have to kind of blend together seamlessly. So one of the benefits that we've seen in the era of COVID, is an opportunity to kind of take those fundamentals, of the MLB experience, refresh them, modernize them, make them a little cleaner, simpler, easier to use. To be honest, everything we've done so far is foundational, and what's really exciting is what comes next. The best is yet to come. We're really excited about personalizing content, so you can see your favorite teams and news and highlights that are relevant to you as an individual instead of kind of what a publisher decides you might like globally. And the next generation of analytics, and media on this platform is going to be really exciting and highly personalized as well. So, we're doing our best to navigate through the COVID winds. And I think we have, a lot of progress to show for it, thanks to these partners, in the last 6 months.
Fantastic. And Tony, coming to you, I mean, we touched upon fans a bit now. How have their sort of behaviors and needs changed both sort of during COVID-19 emergency and afterwards?
Yeah, I think, during the sort of early period, if you like, where there was no sport being played at all, clearly fans were still clamoring for sport and live entertainment, really. That just wasn't possible. But yeah, we saw, driving towards digital engagement to try and get their fix, certainly for any news that was coming out. But also we saw a lot of our customers really getting into using their archive as well, and creating new content from their archive. So not just replaying whole matches or anything like that, but actually, recutting new programs from archive content to give the fans something new to consume. And then I think, since live sport has started to come back, obviously, in the most part, there's still no fans at the stadiums themselves. So they want to consume the live sport now in slightly different ways as well. So, the connection between leagues and teams to their fan through their owned and operated digital platforms is more important than ever. And Jason was just talking about a few examples there, but really thinking about the fan experience on those platforms as well is absolutely paramount. Fans can go to social media to find out scores, news, results, but on the league's digital properties, you want that experience to be so much more, and it can be so much more, and being able to publish really rich content just as quickly as the scores can go onto social is super important to maintain that engagement. And I think, again, Jason touched on it, the next step is also around personalization as well, and people going to the same website as their friend, but getting a different experience because they're a fan of a different team, or they're really into the data visualizations, whereas somebody else just wants to receive the news. And being able to personalize the experience for each individual fan is definitely the future. And again, using some of the tools and capabilities that Google allows as well, that's all achievable and coming now and soon.
Perfect. And Jason, I don't know, from an MLB standpoint, you have any more insights around sort of fans' behaviours and how it's sort of evolved over the last 7 months, and I suppose prior to COVID?
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit already, but to elaborate there, we were a little bit in the dark, to be honest, as to how to forecast capacity, demand, engagement. In an era of COVID, there's no precedent for this, and so we didn't have historical models. We knew that there was likely going to be significant suppressed demand. People were stuck at home. There weren't any live sports. Media production pipelines were shut down, and this had gone on for several months. So when we did bring baseball back in the midpoint of the summer, we really geared up, for a lot of capacity, and it was a good thing we did, because we've set, new high water marks on almost all of our core metrics, particularly around live content. I mean, the demand and the appetite for live sports right now is huge, and one of the metrics that we measure is concurrent viewers on our out-of-market live streaming product. And, we're up significantly from where we've been, at any point over the last 2 decades, and it's not organic growth, it's a step function, from where we were in the past. And so having a platform, again, that can scale and keep that demand, having a platform that's redundant and horizontally scaled and reliable, so that we can continue to add capacity or incur local hardware failures or even data center failures and continue to operate. I mean, these have all been, really important capabilities and features, of this platform.
Perfect. And Caleb, from a sort of Google Cloud perspective, what were the main challenges of bringing baseball back to, such a starved audience?
Well, I think as Jason said, we had done a lot of work, up front and really concurrently with, the unprecedented nature of the pandemic. I think we were, I think building that foundational base, and frankly, this is what Google does every day with our infrastructure. We scale up and down, and whether it's for our customers, for example, in the retail segments on Black Friday, or if it's around, sporting events and high demand, for their owned and operated platforms, or obviously then our own, platforms, our own video platforms. I think, across the board, we've seen, as Tony and Jason have touched on, major increases in the consumption of video. I mean, we're seeing this on every metric, and I think this is whether you're looking at the Ofcom numbers in the UK, or you're looking at metrics, here in the US, people are consuming more video than ever before. And I think what's really exciting is that the ways that they're doing it, it is certainly watching live, but then as Tony touched on, people are going back and they're finding, new content in new ways. And I think that's really exciting. And frankly, the challenge is, I think for us at Google, we've always been a remote working culture, and that might be working in the office, but you have teams that are all over the world. So, I don't think we obviously a lot of challenges going on these days, but I think from an infrastructure capability, of course, we had to adjust a bit to working from home, but, I think the core infrastructure is what it does every day. It is that virtualized product.
I want to pivot now to the MLB Draft. I mean, what was it like to deliver that whilst you're all working remotely, Jason? Can you give some insight behind that?
It was a little surreal, to be honest. We did have the benefit of sort of fast following a very successful NFL draft. The NFL had demonstrated that with coaches and managers and players and prospects at home, you could still make this a very compelling personal experience, with in-home video and, the reaction of the families and so on. That was the best part of the NFL draft, I think. And we definitely took some lessons from that. Because of the flexibility of the platform, we could spin up, an ad hoc live streaming capability with mobile phones, and portable lighting and so forth in those homes, really quickly. It was basically just a fly pack that we sent somebody. You open the box, set it up, turn it on, and you're streaming. And that worked really well. But to the core of the draft, the essence of the draft is, the anticipation and the excitement of announcing a pick, and that's a real-time event. And so Tony mentioned this in kind of his opening summary of, some of our challenges and our requirements for this new CMS platform. Our old CMS platform was not optimized for low latency publishing. It was developed in a time, that predated social media and Twitter and so forth. And so we really wanted to improve latency on our platform significantly. That's probably the number one functional, benefit of the new platform is low latency, like real-time publishing. I can tell a little story here of an experience I had anecdotally before the pandemic. I was at a Rockies game 2 years ago, or before we had launched the platform. I guess it may have been 2017. And it was early in the season, and one of the Rockies players, Nolan Arenado, was pretty mild-mannered and easygoing, was hit by a pitch. And he shocked everybody by charging the mound. And it started this scrum. And I was like, wow, I can't believe this is happening in real time, like while I was watching it. And the first thing I did was pull out my phone to see like how it would be covered online. And Twitter had it, and Instagram had it in, 15 seconds, right? 15 seconds seemed like an eternity after being there in person, but it was up right away. It took the MLB platform maybe 10 minutes, to get a feature story out that got a ton of views. And that was just a simple example of like the difference between, the urgency of real-time live breaking events and being able to publish, in real time. So the new platform can actually publish in real time. And we run into some problems there because now our updates are actually faster than the streaming delay on some of our live streams. There's a 30-second propagation delay on some of the live streams because of content capture and various stages of encoding and caching and buffering and so forth. And so our next challenge is going to be to tune up the media delivery pipeline to keep up with, notifications and breaking news. So that all applies, literally to the draft. Like what you don't want to do is have the draft, picks come in and you just sit there like radio silent, and not being able to announce the pick and share the family's reaction and, have the expert analysis on what this means for the team that had selected this player and what the chemistry looks like, for that fit and things. That's basically the name of the game for the draft. So it's all about like low latency, real time.
And how did, the fragmented virtual setting impact your usual workflows?
Yeah, so basically there's the, live production tooling and workflows and publishing and stuff. Some editor at a console, writing a story and submitting it and publishing it. And then there's this kind of secondary communications layer, which is Hangouts and instant messaging and, video conferencing, creating a virtual war room or a virtual, staff room, for editors and all other functions, to collaborate together. And our role in the technology team is to sort of hover over all that and make sure it's all working and jump in and intervene really quickly if there's any issues and do break fix, in that environment. So it ends up being a really intense, engaging, experience if you're on these video conferences during live events. It's one of my favorite parts of working in live sports is the intensity and the urgency of doing that live production support. You either deliver in the moment or you fail because there's no recover. It doesn't matter if you get it right, an hour later or 10 minutes later in a lot of cases. And so that requires a lot of preparation beforehand. And, that goes all the way back to the beginning, the narrative that we've shared here is you got to start with good partners. You got to understand what your requirements are. You got to understand scale and budget and, value and so forth, and then put all those pieces together. It all comes together in the context of one of these live events. And the baseball schedule is driven by, a series of what we call jewel events. It's opening day, it's the draft, it's all-star. The trade deadline is often, one of those exciting moments because there's sometimes some 11th hour moves within the teams before the pennant race and the postseason. And then of course, October is all about, postseason baseball.
And Tony, can you go into the specifics around how scalable is a sports organization in their infrastructure? How much does it really need to be?
Yeah, well, I think we've already covered it really, but yeah, with sports, there's always a constant level of interest. Sports is engaging, it's entertaining, and there's always that constant level. But Jason's just picked out the kind of key events, certainly for Major League Baseball. There's always peaks around, certain jewel events. There'll be a peak every live game, inevitably. But then, for the annual events like opening day or the World Series or whatever, then you get even more. That's for non-league-based events and sports, that becomes, even more of a peak for around, major events like an Olympics or a World Cup. You'll get nothing on an Olympics for 2 years, and then you get the huge spike for that 3-week period where everybody's engaged. So again, talking of scaling infrastructure, the cloud tools we have now and being able to scale, spin up and spin down at the touch of a button, or even automatically in some cases, it's just much more efficient for the sports organizations that are having to cover these events. You don't need huge data centers sat there and kind of having to second guess in advance how much infrastructure you think you're going to need to cover these events, because it's all just kind of on tap from the likes of Google and the ability to be able to bring that in at any stage is invaluable in today's technology world.
I mean, just to add on that, I think I've spent much of my career building for peak. What is your peak demand? What is your peak usage? How can you cover? How can you ensure? And your whole workflow generates, really gets architected around that peak, and you get limited. Your complete experience gets limited by trying to cover the peak. And I think what's interesting about the cloud and the capabilities that we have at Google Cloud is that peak isn't the issue anymore. It now becomes, frankly, about what are the iterations, or how can you change the experience? How can you potentially personalize that experience for the fan or for the user? And you start thinking more about how many iterations you can run versus having just to be constrained by the volume. The volume is now is surmountable. It is achievable. It is not the first issue you think about, and I think that's what's really transformative about the cloud.
And lastly, looking ahead, Jason, can you give us a glimpse into your plans around the World Series, the upcoming World Series on your digital platform?
Yeah, I always get happy when I hear the words World Series. It's a really nice time of year. It's fall, the warm, hot summer is over. Typically, it's the end of a very long baseball season. As Caleb mentioned, our season runs about 9 months. So there's roughly 2 months of spring training, 6 months of regular season, and then a month of the postseason. And the postseason is sort of the crescendo. Fewer teams playing, stakes are higher, audiences consolidate, and it really means something, to be able to win that trophy. The things that we're excited about this year are, number one, completing the season, and being able to play under the circumstances. It's just, you don't take things for granted anymore. So I would start with just the fundamentals, the fact that we're all able to sort of like sit back and enjoy the game, throughout the next month, I think is a win in itself. And bringing that experience to the fans wherever they are, on mobile, on web, on connected devices, is basically our mission. To get to specifics, one of the things that we're most excited about right now is a launch that we just released within the last few weeks, and that's something called Film Room. It's a fundamental rethink and redesign of the on-demand video experience for MLB. In the past, on-demand basically meant a couple of highlights from each game that were editorially, generated and selected by a producer and then put up after the game. It's sort of like the next day you wake up, you miss the end of the game, you want to see what happened. Maybe you catch a home run or a double play or a no-hitter if you're lucky. And that was it. That was the kind of the canonical experience of baseball. What Film Room offers is fan-driven narrative and navigation through the games. And we do that by taking every play of every live game and cutting it into a separate VOD clip, indexing that, through some rich metadata and baseball-specific metadata. So you can filter by all kinds of different like play situations and scenarios and outcomes, even down to the counts and, pitcher-batter matchups and things like that. And then you can, watch those clips, you can concatenate clips together, and you can share them with your friends. And the idea is, in a world where there's so many competing demands, being able to dedicate 3 hours a night, for 6 months out of the year for 162 games is really a big ask, and for a younger generation of fans, we're excited about being able to offer Film Room as almost a YouTube-like engine or platform, specific to baseball and baseball metadata. And the entire Film Room experience, is powered by Google and Deltatre on the publishing side. There is an asset management platform behind the scenes, a homegrown system called Diamond that does all the media management and tagging and so forth. But one of the challenges of this project was, peer systems integration on the back end. So getting Diamond to talk to Forge and being able to do that low latency publishing through that workflow. So stay tuned for that. The Film Room experience is launched. If you go to MLB.com/video, you can try that out for yourself. And again, it's a foundational launch. We're really excited about some of the things we have on our roadmap coming up as well. But, the World Series content will be in there, and it should be a great way to experience October baseball.
Fantastic. And that is the end, as we are out of time. So thank you so much, Tony, Jason, and Caleb. Really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Happy to be here. Thank you guys for the opportunity.
Thanks.